One of CER's most exciting recent projects is the Collaborative Leadership Initiative. And what that project is, it's really a process of personal and political transformation between local governments and Indigenous governments.
We ask for the truth and the joy of sharing life in a good way.
They're neighbors. They've grown up together. In many cases, there's intermarried families. There's any number of things that bring them together. They shop in the same places. The status quo creates so much red tape. They're simple things of how you do business as a First Nation and how do you set up a business in a community where you want to have reserve land.
But sometimes different levels of government don't recognize that.
We can learn so much from each other, just from stories.
They don't have those conversations directly. They've been conditioned and the system's been set up as First Nations talks to Ottawa, municipalities talk to the province, and never the twain shall meet. And simple things that would help them sort out problems, economic problems, water problems, is very difficult. This process of CLI, Collaborative Leadership Initiative, brings them to the table with their jurisdictions as mayors and reeves and chiefs.
You continue to make it smaller and smaller.
Well, what that Indian Act has done is created a feudal system of government.
To say, you know, we can sort this out ourselves. We too are lawmakers. We can pass laws as a municipality. We can pass laws as a First Nation that will deal with these issues.
What do we do if we have a difficult situation arise? What are the protocols?
We've been so conditioned to thinking we always have to ask permission, when in fact these two levels of government have the possibility to change the face of business and governance in Manitoba in a way that they have already. In fact, that's why we're talking about is it exportable.
My name is Marilyn Fair. I'm with the Centre for Indigenous Environmental Resources. I'm so happy that we are able to meet in person. It's been absolutely ages. So over the past 4 years, we have engaged in what we've called a reconciliation process. It's really been about restoring the treaty relationship. We started with the elected leaders of two levels of government, two forms of government, municipal government, but also First Nation government. If you remember, the very first meeting was in March 2018 at the Winnipeg Art Gallery.
The Truth and Reconciliation report recommendations that all advocate and bringing together elected leaders from levels of government, in this case First Nations, Indigenous governments, and public government.
These are people who have the power to create change individually with their own decisions, but together as a group, regionally, based on a consensus, can create huge change that affects the majority of Manitoba.
We can always achieve more if we're together. And not only to speak of it, but to show the way in our actions.
The collaboration and working together, I don't think it's even an option anymore for us as a region. I think we must do that if we're going to be ultimately successful.
To be able to talk about history, the truth and reconciliation, we're not talking 150 years, we're talking thousands of years.
I looked at the Indian Act and again I just saw, boy, what an antiquated piece of regressive legislation.
There is something wrong in governance with Canada. There's something wrong with governance with Indigenous governments, the way they're set up.
It has to be our goals, our plans.
It's taken us hundreds of years to get to where we are now. And my biggest question is how we break down the barriers.
We did lots of interesting stuff there. It was called Observing Our World, we named that meeting. And all what we really did was started to talk just about who we were as individuals and what our communities wanted. That was really the purpose of the first meeting, is just to start to get to know each other a little bit.
How intriguing that was. The whole concept just seemed really intriguing. And so we started with our first meeting, which I actually missed. I couldn't make it to that meeting, but we sent our deputy reeve, and she went to that first meeting and came back with all sorts of you know, great ideas and things that were discussed, and you know what had gone on at that meeting. So after that, I was able to attend all of the other meetings, and we started down a pathway of really getting to know each other. I think that was the first goal, was to just get to know each other as people.
Chief Bold reminded us, I think he said, we need sturdy walking horses. We don't need fast horses, even though I love a fast horse. We need sturdy.
Well, the Collaborative Leadership Initiative is really a way to bring elected leaders around a table to start to think about solving some of the really big problems that are facing us all as communities across Canada, whether they're problems around climate change, around water, reconciliation, resource management. There's these really big problems that we've often limited who's at the table to try and solve them, and this is a way to bring everyone together.
At the end of the first meeting, we realized there are so many things we don't know about each other and our systems and how we run our meetings and just the laws that apply, and there were so many things there. So we brought in a whole raft of people, experts from across the country, to talk to you about all of those things. These problems are so complex now that no single government can go it alone. It is very difficult, if not impossible, to solve these very challenging problems all on your own. This idea started to form in our minds. What if these 27 leaders came to an agreement around some ideas of common concern and could move together on even one thing? Say, for example, to help Lake Winnipeg, you would have huge impact.
But it's not just Lake Winnipeg that we have to worry about. It represents a serious, broader problem with eutrophication in waters across the Canadian prairies and into the US. And what we're seeing is that warmer temperatures, water temperatures, and lakes in Canada are warming at twice the global rate. What that does is it lowers the threshold at which eutrophication will take place. The world is looking at this because this is a really significant body of water. And it has been declared by some groups as one of the most important endangered lakes in the world. We know that it's difficult to solve these problems, but it's necessary, critical that we do so now before we don't have a chance of doing it in the future. So we're watching this particular situation with great interest, because if it can be done here, we can learn things that can be applied not just in Canada, but around the world.
We're working on hugely significant issues, transformative change, on a very, I think, massive level when you talk about shifting control of healthcare system, shifting control of the infrastructure systems that are currently in place and sort of pressed upon us to accept.
It is a bit daunting at times because you read about these individuals, you see some of them in the media, and it could be a little intimidating. But you also have to step up and realize they're just human beings like you are, and certainly with similar challenges.
I do want to, I guess, apologize to the group for my hesitancy to jump onto the committee. I was thinking, oh my goodness, my workload. And then I looked around the table and thought, everyone else has the same workload, we're all busy people. So I'm looking forward to being part of the steering committee, looking forward to trying to, work with everyone to bring some solutions. So it's exciting days. It's really exciting days.
We've got to break down some barriers that exist that we all inherited. We didn't create these barriers, they come with our history of Canada, and find a way for people to move through those barriers, and that process of moving through is where the transformation happens. You see people, just these blinders come down where they just really start to understand another person from a different culture.
Things that I've learned that I wasn't aware of, some of the treaties and how they were set up. I was totally unaware that back 40 or 50 years ago that they had to get a pass to leave the reserve for, even if it was for just a few hours, or 2 or 3 days or whatever that it would require. It's just hard to believe that something like that would happen I get emotional about it.
The days of trying to do projects, whether they're streets or recreation or attracting business, trying to do that on your own is gone. And competing against each other, you're just cutting your own throat. You might want sewer and water or like a new highway or whatever, but if it's just benefiting yourself and you're trying to pay for it on your own, you're not going to get funding for it, and chances are you're going to have to put your taxes up higher or find other revenues to sustain that. But if you do it regionally, every community doesn't need a rec center, every community doesn't need a skating rink. But if we can share these projects with First Nations or our next door neighbors, it helps everybody. Indigenous people were, for lack of better words, they were raped and pillaged. And it just seemed the leaders of the day that was what was going to happen. And I was totally ignorant. I was not a history fan in school. I didn't follow it. And the history that we did take was slighted, to say the least, to the way things actually were. And I think a lot of the truth is just coming out now. And I know if that happened to my grandparents or great-grandparents, I would think that some wrongs have to be righted.
We realized as we talked that there are many things that First Nation and municipal governments have in common at the local level, which is you are dealing with the needs of your communities day in and day out. You make decisions that directly affect your communities.
The people decided to work together. Collaborative leadership initiatives in Brokenhead, we invited a champion, a young champion dancer, Tyson Prince, who did the chicken dance for us. And right after that, we all joined hands with the mayors and we did a round dance. And I think that was the first time ever in the history in which you had chiefs and mayors, reeves, round dancing together. And I think that just symbolic, the energy in that room really reflects what needs to happen.
The bureaucracy operates like a slow train, and it stays on the slow train track until the politicians come in and say, we want to move this issue to a fast track. But they also know that that fast track may only last 1,460 days. They've been doing this for decades, centuries, literally now.
Columbine?
Yeah.
When did you see it?
That is a Columbine.
Debbie, you are
we used to have lots
You're
of
an
those.
eagle eye.
Yes. I think we've learned a lot since we've started these CLI meetings and getting together with all the Indigenous groups.
Meeting Deborah and getting to know her, and they have, 480 acres of lands in East St. Paul, so it's critical that we know her government and her so that we can work together on the development that they want to do in East St. Paul on their treaty lands.
Yeah.
I just think that, like, for Brokenhead and as chief of Brokenhead, that coming to this table opened up my understanding of municipal governments and how they operate. Also, I think that the Collaborative Leadership Initiative, like Mayor Hart and Mayor Feeblecorn said, is that it brought two groups of people that all live in the same region and area together to learn and gain a better understanding of one another.
What our job is also is to make that help that transformation lead to different actions as governments. The people then choose to do something different together as governments. And so you start to have a transformation in governance also.
How can our regional system try to achieve something like the circular economy? Think about the fact that we have the lowest waste diversion rates in all of Canada. We want to think about what's the money we're leaving on the table in terms of waste that goes into water. We have a water problem, that's how we frame it. What if it became a water opportunity? Some of the things that are going into water and polluting our water, can we pull that into the idea of the circular economy? The social side of this, what this does to societies when you engage in the circular economy initiative, how you change the fairness and the equity and the benefits. Big, hairy, audacious idea for you to learn.
When you have a system that's been in place for 100 years, you have something that economists call high switching costs. That means it's very hard to move from an old system to a new system. And that's one of the reasons why we're so impressed with the work of the Collaborative Leadership Initiative, because what it does is it provides a framework for the governments to work together and start to build new systems and reduce what economists would call high costs.
And anything to add here, you've been hard at work.
What we see is when they identified some of the ways they wanted to move forward, what was possible, the art of the possible together, they began to find ways for their administrations to reach out and to start to develop a system. So I see what's really left, what the legacy of the collaborative leadership in Manitoba is the ability for administrations to work together on areas like waste management, for us to think about protecting our important freshwater resources and ultimately Lake Winnipeg, and also to find ways perhaps to spur economic development and growth where we can provide good jobs and economic opportunities for all Manitobans.
We're in a global climate emergency. We don't have time to waste, and we can't quit, no matter how frustrating it is, no matter how irritating it is, because I'm an old guy. I mean, I'm 70, I've been doing this over 40 years, but I got grandchildren, and it's what's coming is not going to be pretty. It's going to be brutal and tough. And we have to figure out how to deal with these intractable problems, and it comes back to elected leaders, relationships, intractable problems, and using their powers and authorities that they have to work together to solve these common problems. I'm standing by this treaty medal that was all agreed by the leaders that when we gathered, this treaty medal would be up as a sign of the effort to renew the treaty relationship.
That leads us here to today. This is meeting number 9. And as you can see, we've come a long way to get to this point. We're in our 4th year from the very beginning. For 153 years, First Nations and municipalities really were not in the same room together, really didn't talk. We've accomplished a lot through these relationships. The MOU is really meant to, the medal in the MOU is really meant to be a more modern version of the spirit and intent of the treaty to work together. It's supposed to be how we should have started at way back when, you know, way back at the start of the treaty relationship, and it didn't go that way. But this is a process to try and help us along that path, a path forward. You folks made a decision. You were going to work together for the next 4 years through a memorandum of understanding that you signed at the original location of the signing of Treaty 1.
That this is a closing the circle, a reestablishing of the original treaty relationship that was established in this very spot 148 years ago.
Our hope is that we are able to bring harmony to our communities and bring harmony amongst ourselves, and that reconciliation is not simply a word, it is an action that society decided to take, and that people decided to engage in that, and that their conduct and their behavior reflected what reconciliation really means, and that is harmony among humans.
I believe this is the birth of a movement. I believe that this is a change in the way people can sit down and have conversations.
That's walking hand in hand and strengthening who we are in this place we call Canada.
We often understand agreements to be lengthy and complex, but the spirit and intent that Chief Lynch has mentioned is caught in the handshake. And so you carry with you an image of people of diversity saying we're going to share life together on this island.
There was a massive gap in the last 154 years. That even though they're neighbors and have lived together all these years, they've never done work together. Now as leaders they had to and wanted to, and they stayed at the table in spite of the fear and apprehension, and they identified the way to water, the way to fix the economy. Any other intractable political problem starts with governance.
There's an opportunity for the 2 levels of government to exercise their jurisdiction and perhaps be the most effective change makers in Canada.
We're not here to harm anyone, and our original intent, even of the treaty, was reconciliation and to try to work together so that we can develop this country together.
Economically, politically.
Coming to a meeting to participate in something that they supported, to now owning it and feeling like, I know what I want to do next. And that was the conversation we saw at every table. And the medicine wheel guided them in their conversation from sort of their individual role to their community to, you know, broader governance stuff. And it was exactly what we were hoping for.
To carry out the treaty relationship the way it should have been done starting back in 1871.